Welcome to the first open session of the Effective Employee course. The topic of this session is personal audit and checklist of an effective employee. Well, as you already know, this session is held in an open format with both course students and anyone interested attending. This course consists of 11 sessions. The course is entirely dedicated to how to be an effective employee in a company. Moreover, this course is simultaneously beneficial for the employees themselves, who will learn how to become the most effective employees. In other words, for them, it is the best course that covers everything: management, time management, negotiations, communications, absolutely everything. This course is also useful for managers, because managers can learn what they should expect from their team and how to guide and inspire their employees. So for a manager, it is something to benchmark against. And of course, such a course is useful for HR because HR, one way or another, aims to turn all employees into A players through their actions. Therefore, it is important to understand what can be done with employees in the company to make them as effective as possible. And here is the comprehensive information. Now I want to address those who are watching on Facebook. Friends, if it is not too much trouble, click the Start Party or Start Watch Party button so that as many people as possible can see this information. It seems to me that now, during the crisis and quarantine, after people finally return to the office, it will be very helpful if everyone focuses on their efficiency as much as possible and helps the company in business. So please click Start Party, Start Watch Party, or simply repost so that as many people as possible can see this session, this video. Thank you very much. So this is the first of 11 sessions. Today we will talk about who an effective employee is. I will show you a tool called the Audit and Checklist of an Effective Employee. I will explain what companies use to evaluate their employees, what tools they use, and how, by knowing this system, you can become such an employee. Let us start, as usual, with a very brief introduction. My name is Mike Pritula. You can see the list of companies where I have worked on the screen. That is about 15 years of work experience. In my work, I rely on global best practices. I regularly study, read books, research papers, articles, and share materials with students. I would appreciate it if you could also write a little bit about yourself, your city, position, and company where you work. This way we will get to know each other and other participants will read about you. So please, those who are watching on Facebook, write in Facebook. Those who are watching on Zoom, write in Zoom. There you go. And we will see what our geographic spread is. I am very curious to know where you are watching from. So who is going to be first? Let us spend literally 2 minutes on this brief introduction, read out the information, and then boldly move on. Plus, it is an opportunity for you to make yourself known. It is a bit of personal branding. Oh, here is Dinara from Almaty Human Resources. Great, thank you, Dinara. Welcome. All right. So, Recruiter Human Resources Diversida from Kiev. I am not sure if I am reading this correctly. Olga from Kiev Stone Gallery. Yes, Olga, we already know each other from the courses. Hello, everyone. I am from Ivanovo, Russia, working as a human resources resource manager at Aquilon Company. Cool. Yes, welcome. All right, friends, whoever else is ready to write or finish writing, go ahead. We will gradually move on. Those who are responding, Specialist Elena, to those who will be taking the course and those who are already on the course. I want to warn you that we have a lot of homework in the course, and completing it gives you the opportunity to receive a diploma. In other words, all completed homework equals a diploma. So, let us start with why anyone would want to be an A player in the first place. Based on participants. Kharkov, Human Resources Inspectors, Alina, thank you, and there is Aigul Nursultan, Human Resources. Yes. So far, we have only had check-ins from Ukraine and Kazakhstan. And also Ivanovo, Russia, that's right. We haven't had anyone from Belarus yet. Okay, here's another one. Elena from St. Petersburg, Development Director. Great. So why would someone want to be an A player? You might wonder. In general, why should employees aspire to that? What does it give them? Why is it necessary? And so on. There are several reasons. First, when you're an A player, work is more interesting. For an employee, being among the first, among the best, it's just cool. It's like being the best player in sports, the best soccer player, the best basketball player, being the best singer, for example, or the best businessman. Right now, many people are following Yevgeny Chernyak, who has become famous. He has a big business, he's producing a TV show. Of course, it's exciting when you feel you're ahead of the curve. So this is one of the first arguments for why it's worth being an A player. Second, it develops you. Those who strive to be in the top 1% of the most successful, the most effective, are constantly developing themselves and staying in good shape. As a result, they handle various hardships and stresses more easily. In other words, those people who We're A players before the crisis, and quarantine will find it easier and will recover from this situation faster compared to those who have been relaxed for a long time. On this note, I see many have written, headhunters, recruiters, agency owners, businessmen have written that people have been relaxed for too long and that they've forgotten the need to be the best. And now we have this situation which is such a wake-up call for everyone. Of course, it's easier for A players to get through all this because their muscles are toned, and all muscles, not just physical but intellectual too. This means they'll come out of all this more easily. Furthermore, all of this is rewarded. If we look at the income of an average A player and effective employee, of course, crises do affect it negatively. I showed the last two crises. There was a drop in the dollar exchange rate in 2008 and another drop in 2014. Now, recently, it seems to have started to fall a bit, or rather our currency against the dollar. But apparently not as much. Unlike many other people, A players always experience growth after a downturn. So, striving to be the most effective employee, being an A player, it's also about earning a deserved income. And this is what top companies want, what any company wants. That is, nowadays, A players are talked about very often. It's a term that has relatively recently started gaining popularity, although there were various other terms before, like effective employee, valuable employee, hypo, high potential, and so on. For many years, people have been talking about there being some top performers and then there's everyone else. And now it's being talked about again. That is, any company is interested in such employees. So we can say that being an A player or being an effective employee is the new standard expected of an employee. Let's move on. From a human resources perspective, there are many human resources professionals here, as we'll see. In any books, trainings, courses, articles, human resources professionals are focused on the most effective employees. The recruitment strategy is built around hiring the best employees. Development strategy, retention strategy, performance management are built around the most effective employees. So this, I would say, is simply the new norm today. Being an A player is like having a college degree was not too long ago. That's the norm now. And it's important to understand that if we look at our entire life, how many years we have, how many weeks in our life, work in a company takes up a significant part of our life. And either you live this significant part as a leader, a top employee, a successful employee, and get immense satisfaction, or it all happens in a less interesting way. Accordingly, this course is focused on dotting the I's from all three perspectives and communicating some common, uniform standards to everyone. On the employee's side, to communicate who A players are, how to become one, and what expectations there are for them. On the other hand, to show human resources how to turn employees into A players, how to measure them, and what to do with them. From the company's perspective, represented by managers, to also provide an understanding of who A players are, what goals to set for developing employees, and how to become A players themselves. Human resources professionals and managers should be A players. Therefore, this course is a response to the modern demand for A players. That's what it's all about, essentially. To assist with this course, I've developed an A player audit checklist for today's session. It's a Google document. I'll now share the link in the chat for those watching here and post it in the Facebook chat as well. We actually have many parallel broadcasts going on. I'll try to post it in a general chat where I see many people. So what's in this document? I'll explain while I'm sharing it. In this document, I've compiled all the most up-to-date tools. Okay, I'm posting it in the Facebook chat comments. And if you're in the Academy, I'll also post it in the Academy's Telegram chat. If you're not on Telegram, search for Mike Pritula Academy, find the Telegram chat, and you'll see the file link there. Now I'll show you this file. This is a crucial point because the entire course and a lot of information is built around this file. So I'm sharing my screen. Please type a plus sign when you see my document on your screen. I see, yes. Look, for this checklist, if you want to work with it, I've shared a link that automatically suggests creating a copy. So you'll likely just click Create a Copy, and from then on, you'll have your personal file. This means you can fill it out and no one else will see it. What's in this file? The first tab is called Checklist. This tab contains the compiled results from all other tabs. Here, if you look at the bottom, there are many tabs. The results of all tabs are displayed in percentages and a diagnosis is provided. What kind of player this person is for the company. That is, a person can be an A player for one company but not for another. Here, based on the example data that's been filled in, we get a D player. Of course, when you fill it with real data, you'll get your own assessment. Managers can give this tool to their employees. I have several courses where I train managers, for example, the people management course. There, I gave managers the file, they gave it to their employees, and the employees filled it out. In principle, there were no problems with this. No one was afraid or embarrassed. They filled it out quite openly. HR can also give this file to employees. The only thing is that an individual copy is created for each employee. What components are here? I will show you the tabs and then we will return to the presentation. I will explain within the presentation what this is about and why. So we have the ideal job component. The first component is how this tab works. There are statements to which a person responds indicating how much they agree with them. It says here to respond to each statement on a scale from 0 to 10. You can either select from a list or directly input using the keyboard. That is it. There are 3 questions, and the average ideal job score for a person is calculated here. I recommend this exercise to everyone. It actually originates from coaching. I have been using it for a long time. If I am not mistaken, it might have even been invented by Thomas Leonard. Anyway, it is not crucial who invented it, so you can assess how ideal your job is for you using the first tab. The second tab is about talents. Here, it is important to note that we check the boxes next to the talents we believe we have and those we actually use. This is a very simple way of assessing talents. In the course, I provide more in-depth, more professional methods. But to have a document that includes everything, I have also included this method of talent reporting. Next is the thinking type, very simple, just yes or no answers here. Then engagement is again on a 10-point scale, and ambition is also on a 10-point scale, followed by burnout. Here, it is based on frequency. That is, for each line, only one option is selected, and the burnout level is calculated. Next, we have KPIs and performance. Here, we also use a 10-point scale. Then we have a matrix that automatically displays the person's current position. That is, based on the answers that were entered, although there were not actually any in this case. The matrix has determined that we have an employee with low potential and low efficiency. You can read here what consequences they might face. It says here that termination is a possibility. There is also loyalty, which is very simple. Just one checkbox is marked at a certain level. And if all the columns are filled in, you can go here where the employee's overall level is ultimately displayed. That's how this file works. If you've noticed, this is a combination of many tools that I typically use for companies to evaluate employees. Those that could be turned into a checklist. There are also things like performance assessment and competency evaluation, which of course cannot be included here, but we've incorporated them through the questionnaire itself. So it's like the person is indirectly evaluating their own results. That's how the file works. Now I'll go back to the presentation and tell you what's next. So, here's a list of everything we diagnose to determine whether an employee is an A player or not. It's important to understand that there are not many such A players in the world for various reasons. First, many people are simply not engaged, according to Gallup research, and this is a problem. Secondly, many employees have issues with their managers, so in the course I'll provide links to the file. Many employees have issues with their managers, and this automatically reduces their chances of being an A player in the company. In our course, we pay a lot of attention to interacting with managers. We'll have several sessions where we'll revisit this topic, discussing how to become an effective employee for your manager, how to build effective relationships, how to effectively report on your work in a positive way, and so on. Why are not all employees A players? Because few people utilize their talents. So here's the next question for you. Please tell me, do you know your talents? Put a plus if you're certain that you know your talents, if you've somehow evaluated or diagnosed them, and a minus if you've never thought about it and do not even know what your talents are. Please indicate your response. Let's see. According to research, there are few people in the world who know their talents. And again, we pay special attention to this in our course. Talent assessments for identifying talents. I provide several tools that very accurately help determine what talents people have. Okay, I see plus, plus, minus, plus, minus, minus, plus. It's the lack of understanding of one's talents that also leads to, I see a minus, leads to many people not being able to become full-fledged A players because they're not capable, because no one has helped them with this. Next. As a result, many companies fire employees because they fail to effectively match the position with the person. But also employees are generally not super satisfied. These are the kind of numbers that are very real and can probably be influenced if you understand how this whole system works and have the right tools, which we examine in our course. Now let's talk a bit about different aspects. In this file, you've seen that there are different aspects. What does an ideal job mean? There's this concept of an ideal job. It's described in various books. It's been around for quite some time that an ideal job for a person is when 3 factors align. They do what they love to do, they're good at it, and they're well paid for it. My experience working with people as a coach and in HR shows that, on average, if we take, for example, 100 points as the maximum score one can get on this assessment, people typically score around 60 points. Interestingly, many scores can be improved by about 20 points, even without changing positions or making any major global changes. It's just a matter of making some adjustments. You know, it's like tuning a radio to a channel. Now it's done with buttons, plus or minus half the range. There used to be a dial. It's the same at work. Many people have the opportunity to improve their job satisfaction in their current position by simply changing a few factors. But first, by realizing this, people who have used this tool, or when I worked as a coach with people, they realized at their job what could be improved, worked on improvements with their manager, and enhanced their job satisfaction, which ultimately led to a better result. That's why it's very important to understand what a person loves, and it's important to develop professionally. And there's also the point that you need to know how to negotiate a salary raise and do it well, do it effectively. I have an article on this topic which I recommend reading as additional material. It's called 7 Simple Ways to Get a Salary Raise. I wrote it for Lifehacker, a website like that, about 6 years ago, but it's still relevant. And now I think it will be relevant again after this crisis. So I recommend it. Next is talent. Talent is, of course, a very big topic. There's a lot to say about it. I'll try to explain. So if you look at each person as a whole, everyone will have certain inclinations and talents. That is, some things will come easier, some things will be more difficult. Consequently, if a manager knows their employees and their talents, they can organize work more effectively. I understand that this person has a talent for Excel, and this person doesn't have a talent, but they still know it well, for example. The manager can assign work to the one who has the talent. The same applies to negotiations, reports, anything. What's the beauty of talents? Very often, because people naturally strive to develop and improve things, it's sometimes hard to tell if a person is naturally good at something. They can do it because they've learned to do it or because they have a talent for it. You know, I'm not sure if we have anyone in the chat today who was retrained to write with their other hand, or maybe someone who practices writing with both hands or has tried it. If you're right-handed, you can learn to write with your left hand. I mean, everyone has this ability. There's nothing inherently difficult about it. You just need to practice. It will take time and practice. But if you're right-handed, you'll write much better with your right hand than with your left. People who were retrained to write with their other hand can write well with both hands, but they'll still write better with their dominant hand. There's a very small number of people who can use both hands identically. Their brain development is such that it doesn't matter to them, but this is a very small number of people. But in general, anyone can be taught. So that person who has a talent or predisposition for something will work much more effectively on the task and will get much more enjoyment from it than a person who was taught reluctantly through I don't want to, I can't, and so on. And in the end, they can do it too, but every time they do it, they experience difficulty and lack of motivation and so on. Left-handed people were retrained to write with their right hand. Well, I think people who have been through this understand the difference. Let's move on. Why it's important to know your talents and who is truly an A player. I'm now ready to approach this topic and explain. So when a company talks about a position, a responsible position, whether it's a top position or a mid-level one, the company creates a list of competencies or requirements that are necessary for a person in this position. In other words, the company starts to fantasize. I want this and this and this and this and this. And a huge list is born of what the company expects from the position. Then in the market, this thing happens when a company enters the market. For example, it has a list of 4 competencies. It starts looking at candidates and begins to evaluate candidates based on these competencies. It turns out that there are almost no people who have all these competencies developed 100% or even more, but there are a few such individuals, like Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, but for some reason they've already created their own businesses and don't want to come work for us. What does a company usually do when it had the appetite for all 4 competencies to be highly developed, but faced the reality that such people don't exist? It gradually and evenly lowers the requirements for all 4 competencies until it finds a person who is more or less suitable in all competencies. You know, that well-rounded person who's not outstanding in anything but has no apparent flaws. And many companies mistakenly believe that a person without flaws is an A player, although in reality a person without flaws is someone who has developed a little bit of everything, but they haven't excelled at anything. Precisely because it took time to develop a little bit in everything, they didn't focus on their strengths but constantly improved their areas for development. Such people perform mediocrely in their positions, because to succeed in a position, you need to be a genius in 1, 2, or 3 competencies to be much better than others. And only those companies that have figured this out, and there are more and more of such companies. That's why companies are starting to engage in job profiling, ability assessment, competency prioritization, and the implementation of the score recruitment tool. Such companies are beginning to understand that we don't need 14 competencies for this position. We need 1, 2, or 3 competencies, but they need to be highly developed. And companies that realize this start looking for people who have developed these 1, 2, or 3 competencies well. They start paying attention to talents and begin recruiting people who have talents in these areas. These people simply skyrocket in their positions, shining like stars and becoming A players. At the same time, they have many flaws, and companies understand this and accept it. Therefore, without knowing your talents, it is impossible to find the position where you will be brilliant. By the way, career guidance is based on understanding one's talents. Usually in adulthood, this is achieved through trial and error, but at a young age, through recognizing talents, a person can choose their career path. In the end, the scheme is as follows. If we take a certain sales position and take a list of those competencies needed for a salesperson, as I roughly described, the company first looks for a person who has everything super developed. These people either do not exist or are astronomically expensive, so the company gradually lowers requirements for each competency, hiring such a universal person, but this is a poor candidate, not brilliant in anything. But the right company, which has realized what it means to be an A player and hire A players, has identified the 3 most important competencies and is willing to overlook those competencies that are not developed because they know that these 3 competencies lead to absolute success in the position. This is the essence of being an A player, one of many nuances. It is important to understand that when a person has 3 highly developed competencies, they experience what is called in business the halo effect. That is, their other talents, or rather qualities, also develop due to these highly developed competencies. This means they can leverage their talents to perform well in areas where they generally have little expertise. So it turns out they compensate with their talents for areas that are underdeveloped, and that is why they work effectively. But companies think that a person is effective in everything and try to find such a person. You know, very often in business I have encountered a situation where they find a candidate. They see that he seems talented in something, but there are big doubts, and this is not right, and that is not quite right. And overall, there are many doubts, but in something he is super brilliant. And the company takes a long time to decide, then hires him and sees that the person just works brilliantly in the position. And they think how great that we hired him, and they will hire more. Or the opposite. They hire someone without flaws thinking, we have finally found the perfect candidate, and they do well. The person starts working and does not shine. And there is nothing good about it. That is how it works. That's why identifying talents is very important. Next on the audit checklist is an assessment of mindset type. Please give a plus if you've heard of the concept of fixed or growth mindset. Here's the distinction between fixed and growth mindsets. Has anyone heard of this? Yes, I see some people have. There's an entire book on this topic. That's what it's called. They also call it growth mindset, the second term, which describes that people have 2 types of thinking. There are people who predominantly have a fixed mindset. They don't believe that you can develop any skill you want. They believe that everything comes to people only through luck, that if someone is successful, they were just lucky. These are people with a fixed mindset. People with a growth mindset aren't afraid of failure, aren't afraid to experiment, believe that anyone can learn new skills, that patience and hard work overcome everything, that constant effort yields results, and so on. As a result, both as individuals and employees, such people grow and develop more actively. That's why there's an assessment of mindset type in the file. It's important to understand your own mindset and to develop flexibility, to practice, to experiment, to not be afraid of mistakes above all, and to see how much can be achieved through effort. Next. The next element of the A-player audit checklist is work engagement. To assess work engagement, we use the GLQ-12 questionnaire. This is a questionnaire from the well-known consulting company GLP. It's one of the world's leading consulting companies. They developed their questionnaire a long time ago, back in 1996. To date, over 30 million people have completed it. This questionnaire assesses how engaged a person is in their work. Moreover, engagement here is a 2-way street. On one hand, the company and the manager influence a person's engagement. On the other hand, there are many factors that a person can take control of themselves, start managing them, and increase their engagement. So personally, I believe that engagement is a 2-way game. That is, a person should meet the company halfway. For example, one of the questions is whether you know what the company expects from you at work. One could say that a person doesn't know what the company expects from them at work and therefore they're not engaged. On the other hand, one could say that nothing prevents a person from going to their manager, setting up a meeting and clarifying what is expected of them at work in order to understand and work effectively. Therefore, the questionnaire measures the degree of engagement, and this degree is factored into the calculation of the employee's final rating. What should be done? The recommendation is to take the situation into your own hands and work on increasing engagement without waiting for the company to influence it. Next is ambition. Why is ambition assessed in this questionnaire? So, there's a concept known as high potential employees. This has been talked about for a long time. I think you may have heard about it repeatedly. They're also called by other names. This, as I mentioned at the beginning of the class, was a prototype of A players. That is, people used to be categorized as high potential, medium potential, low potential, high potential. Everyone strived to hire them, everyone wanted to find them, retain them, develop them, pay high salaries, add them to talent pools, and so on. From the A player perspective, high potential isn't everything. It's just one piece of the puzzle in the whole system, but it's important. What is high potential? It's a very important tool for understanding both employees and managers and HR, but few people know how it's calculated and what it depends on. In terms of employee potential, I like the model you see on your screen the most. This is SEBCAB's model. They have now been bought by Gartner, and before that it was SHL. That is, CB bought SHL, Gartner bought them all. In short, they've ultimately decided to keep SHL as a brand, so we can say it's the SHL model. This model suggests that a person has high potential when three components align. These are their abilities, meaning what they're capable of. For example, the type of thinking is one manifestation of abilities. Having various talents is also a manifestation of abilities. The second is their ambition. So, a high potential person is, in part, someone who simply wants more than they currently have. And the third component is engagement. We measure engagement through talents and thinking style, while we can measure ambition through surveys and conversations with the person, and ambition is very important. Interestingly, in my work, I've observed situations where a company struggled with its top managers because they lacked the ambition expected of top executives. The company was reaching a new level, its ambitions were growing, transitioning from a local company to an international one. It was becoming a leader on the international stage. But people were content with the level when the company was still small. They set themselves a goal of earning $3,000, getting an apartment, a car. They started earning $5,000, bought an apartment, a country house, a car for their wife, had 2 kids and got a dog. They had fulfilled their life plan 100% and felt no need to progress further. And the company had problems with ambition, meaning these people didn't need anything more. Therefore, potential, considering ambition, is an important factor in a person's development. Some quick tips here are to dream big and fight imposter syndrome. That means understanding where you are now, realizing what you can aspire to, and trying to expand your horizons in every possible way. That's why, from the perspective of employee development and boosting the company's potential, what do? They take their employees on what's called management tours abroad to some top companies. There are special organizers for such management tours. They send their employees to international conferences, fly them business class, put them up in expensive hotels, rent expensive cars, so that the person can experience a different standard of living and boost their ambitions. Next, in the A-Player Checklist questionnaire, there's burnout. Burnout is a very important issue, and you might remember that last year or the year before, the World Health Organization classified burnout as a disease. Finally, they acknowledge that this problem exists and needs to be addressed. By the way, regarding the current situation, if you believe in conspiracy theories, I have many different theories about why we're in coronavirus quarantine now. So, if you believe in conspiracy theories, one could assume that someone decided to combat people's burnout on a massive scale and sent everyone on a sabbatical for some time, though it's unclear for how long. So, definitely on one hand, burnout should decrease now. On the other hand, there's a lot of other stress that prevents people from properly relaxing. For example, uncertainty about the future. Burnout is a crucial factor in whether you'll be an A player or not, because people who are burning out or have already burned out, they have no energy for anything at all. They even lose their love for work. That's why there's burnout diagnostics, and there are things you can do about burnout. We cover this in detail in the course. If anyone's interested but not ready to take the course yet, in the presentation, which I'll post in the Academy's Telegram chat, there will be a link to an article, or you can Google it, on how not to become a corporate slave. 26 life hacks to prevent burnout at work. I also wrote this article for Lifehacker. There, I give recommendations on how to deal with burnout. Next, achieving company goals is what an employee demonstrates in terms of results. From this perspective, you might have heard a phrase, or rather a term, like over-delivery. Give a plus if you've heard it. Maybe some companies even say that their value is over-delivery. It's like an over-the-top demonstration of results or going above and beyond. There are also synonyms like exceeding expectations, delivering more than expected, and so on. This is what modern companies now expect from people. That's why there are many questions, a whole section that assesses how much a person over-delivers. What's important is that in terms of how well a person performs, companies in today's world evaluate people, most often using a rating scale. They abandoned it for a while, I recently remembered. Somewhere around 2012, 2013 to 2014, a series of articles started coming out about Microsoft abandoning ratings. Yes, they gave up on ratings. Some other company did it too. In short, everyone started writing, "We've abandoned ratings. We're tired of it. This normal distribution, ranking employees, blah, 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 we won't do it anymore." Everyone's been writing about the 4-day work week. There was hype about it recently, and then you read a bit later. And the company went back to ratings, just renamed them a bit because it's not good without ratings. It's unclear what to do with employees. Moreover, according to research, Generation Y wants to know, and especially Generation Z, they want to know their ratings because they are used to evaluating themselves. They're on social media with likes, reposts, and other things. This is also a form of evaluation. That's why the number of views on YouTube matters. So there is a demand for evaluation from employees, but with one caveat. Do you know who doesn't want ratings in the company and who does? I think you can guess. People with low ratings are, of course, strong opponents of ratings. They believe that there shouldn't be ratings, that people can't be quantified, that it's some kind of devil's idea to put numbers on people's foreheads. Well, people who work well, who see that someone else is working poorly, they want to be told, you have a rating of 4 or 5, and that person has a rating of 2 or 3. In other words, they want fairness above all. They want adequate evaluations and recognition of achievements. That's why companies are starting to bring back ratings. The only thing is that the normal distribution, as it was called before, is now moving away from this a bit. They don't tell managers that they should have 20% top performers, 70% average, and 10% low performers. So these restrictions have been removed. There's really no great need for them, but ratings are still given. And of course, people who get high ratings, they get the highest salary increase, high bonus, development opportunities, inclusion in the talent pool, and many other great benefits that the company provides. So what needs to be done here? You need to understand how the goal-setting system works. I know many people, many talented hard workers who have low ratings in companies because performance, efficiency, and productivity are slightly different things. You can be efficient, be productive, but not effective, or we can be efficient but not productive. In short, one doesn't necessarily mean the other. There are people who do a lot for the company, try hard, but the company needed a little bit of something else, something very specific. Well, that's the thing, something different. And people don't realize this in time, and as a result, they get low ratings. Because in business, it's very important to be able to focus on where the company needs to go. So here are some quick recommendations. In the course, of course, we cover all this in more depth during specialized sessions. Be careful with goals, regularly update goals, spend time on goals consciously. And if goals have changed, update them in the system so it doesn't happen that goals changed but remained the same in the system. At the end of the year, the person was evaluated based on the old goals and received a low rating. Potential. What all this is now used for together, that very potential we talked about, is used in companies in a tool such as the potential matrix or 9-box, or simply 9-box as it is also called. What is this tool? It is an instrument where all employees are placed into one of 9 cells based on an assessment of their potential. I have already explained how potential is assessed based on ability, ambition, engagement, and performance. Performance, for example, is an employee's productivity over a year. So, the 9-box works by placing all company employees into one of 9 cells. Some of them become part of the talent pool, which is developed, retained, given second chances, and so on. And some become either high potential but low performing employees who are demoted until they become effective again. Some become high performing employees with low potential, whose careers are fixed at the level where they are still effective, while others are let go. Therefore, it is important to understand how a company operates. Why a company lets someone go. Very often people do not understand why a company would fire someone with high potential, but they are not delivering results, because a company needs more than just potential and results. And not all companies understand that before dismissing a person, they should try them in another position, because it might just be that the person's current role does not match their abilities. So what should one do in terms of this matrix? Increase engagement, communicate ambitions, know your talents and showcase them, and exceed goals and KPIs. This does not mean working more or better. It means working in the direction the company needs. Because if you work hard but miss the mark, it is of little use. And the last tab in the document is company loyalty, meaning any company wants employee loyalty. For various reasons, I think there is a lot of personal aspects here, because unlike engagement, which is backed by very deep, multi-year, multi-million-dollar research, loyalty has a tool for assessment, and there is an understanding that loyalty is formed based on mutual relationships between the company and employees. There is an understanding that loyalty affects employee retention. I have not come across any more groundbreaking conclusions about loyalty from systematic comprehensive studies, but companies really value employee loyalty and do not appreciate disloyalty. Therefore, loyalty is another area where companies need to work on one side and employees on the other. An A player needs to focus their attention and ask themselves how loyal they are to their company, why their loyalty is as it is, how it can be changed, and work in that direction. What else interesting do they say about loyalty? Where can we find the most rational reasoning for why companies need loyal employees? By the way, companies themselves rarely think about this. Most companies want loyal employees simply as devoted individuals who put the company first, even where it's not necessary. Where loyalty really benefits the business is in the connection between employee loyalty and customer loyalty. It's believed that employees are, you might say, transmitters. If an employee is loyal, they will transmit their loyalty, that is, pass it on to the company's customers. Conversely, if an employee is dissatisfied with their company, not loyal, they might not say anything to the client, but customers will pick up on it. Therefore, loyalty is an area worth developing if a company is interested in quality customer service. Not all businesses may be interested in this, but for service businesses, it's very important because there's virtually no other way to achieve customer loyalty except by greatly increasing employee loyalty. Everything else? Either eliminate customer-employee contact altogether, create some kind of super digital business, then maybe it will work, or strive for employee loyalty. In the area of loyalty, there are also activities on both sides. On one side from the company, there are things to do to increase employee loyalty, and on the other hand, there are also things for employees to do. In other words, I generally believe that in all company-employee relationships, there's always something to be done on both sides. So you can't say it's the company's fault if something is wrong with the employees, and you can't say that the employees are to blame. It's always the fault of both or the success of both. If the company and employees are successful, it's not because the company is awesome, but because both parties contributed. So what can be done here for employees in terms of loyalty? Get to know the company better, become a user of the company's products, make friends within the company. These are the things that will lead to loyalty. What else? So what else allows a person to develop as an A player in the company? This includes discovering your talents, not just knowing about them, but actually revealing them. It's understanding the company culture and rules. And very often, both the culture and rules are unwritten. It's the ability to solve tasks and problems end to end, knowing how to do it. It's working effectively and properly with your manager. It's self-organization, teamwork, and productivity. All of this is what makes people A players. All of this can lead to that. It's also about achieving your goals, managing your time effectively, and career growth through learning and development. Maintaining your motivation and effective communication also make an employee more of an A player. In the course, for the next 10 sessions, we focus entirely on all these components so that course participants can become independent A players. HR professionals could pass this knowledge on to employees and employee A players, as well as for themselves. And leaders can create from their team a winning team, a star team, a team and a star, even knowing how to organize it all. This is the plan going forward for those taking the course. Here are a few books on the topic of today's lesson that I can recommend reading. A flexible mindset or growth mindset is about the type of thinking that influences potential and abilities. A book about OKRs, about working on goals, a book about engagement, a book about taking care of employees, and a book about proper methodologies. I'll be recommending a lot of additional literature like these books in every session, so get ready. This concludes today's session. The homework assignment for course participants is to fill out the checklist that you received today for yourself. And a question for everyone: what was most valuable for you today? Please share as feedback. If you had any insights about today's session, please share them. Also, I'm addressing those watching on Facebook. If it's not too much trouble, please hit repost on this video. Let's give people a chance to think about how to become A players in these challenging times and help them with information. So I'm looking forward to your feedback. What was most valuable for you today? Write in the chat. I saw that. And they implemented 9box starting this year? Cool, well done. Let me reiterate why A players are needed for a company to achieve results. You know, it's like why a soccer team needs players to win the Champions League. A players are needed by a company to beat the competition. It's very simple. Okay, well, I'm waiting for your answers. We're talking about drivers. You could say they are drivers too. That is, the company's employees are the drivers of its success. I learned about 9box. Cool. Thank you, Irina. Interesting as always, but honestly, how relevant will the checklist responses be from the employees? Well, experience shows that they are relevant. For some reason, many questions are not fully clear to the employee, which answers will be better to give or which will be worse. Secondly, filling out a checklist can be a very good push towards self-development for an employee. That is, the person who fills out the checklist, they will see their area for improvement, and this can be a good starting point for further development. Even if they try to exaggerate a little bit, in reality, the manager will see through it. Because usually among all the participants, the manager would say, "My employee has selected all the talents." I ask, "Doesn't that bother you? What's troubling?" So I ask, "What are you going to do about it?" "But I'll probably talk to him." That can't be right. Okay. So questionnaires, you've explained the importance of 2 to 3 competencies really well. Thank you, clear and concise. You're welcome. I also want to thank you. Thank you for being online today. Thank you for coming to listen. It's always nice to interact with intelligent people to correspond by reading your comments. It's pleasant to see that some people regularly attend these webinars. It motivates me to continue and move forward. So here's more feedback about the checklist and potential matrix. We do something similar, but now our understanding of how to use the tool has expanded a bit. Thank you very much. You're welcome. I've never questioned my talents before. Well, now you have a reason to think about it. Great. All right then. With that, we conclude today's webinar. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. We'll meet with the course participants exactly 1 week from now and continue our lesson. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.